We've had some brilliant speakers, and we're just about to have another one. Tobias Leenaert here is the Vegan Strategist. Tobias has been blogging regularly and speaking at a number of vegan and animal rights conferences and events, especially in Europe. He's got a lot of people who really, really value his work. And Tobias does have quite a refreshing approach in some ways, but also quite a controversial approach in others. But I think there's never a question mark about Tobias Leenaert has a very big heart for the vegan thing. And I've been really interested to get to know you actually on Animal Rights Zone, especially debating over the last 9 months. And I'm really, really glad that Tobias accepted our invitation to come. And on that note, I will hand over to you, except to ask, please, for a big round of applause, Tobias Leenaert.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So my talk is called Making Compassion Easier. It's a bit of a strange title, but I think it will make more sense after half an hour. I hope so, at least. So just very briefly about me, I founded the Belgian vegetarian vegan organization EVA, Ethical Vegetarian Alternative. That's an organization with 12 staff that I left this year, and I went on to work on myself with a blog, Vegan Strategist, and with talks and with a book that I'm writing that will be called How to Veganize the World in 30 Years. Vegan Strategist, I invite you to check it out. There's controversial views, there's controversial things that I will say here today, but I hope you will hang on and maybe have some new ideas after this. So I'll introduce some ideas. I talk about the challenge that we're up against. I talk about the why, like the why is like the reason that we give to people why they should change. The what is the message, like what message do we give, and the how I have in another talk. This is not for now. Okay, so before I begin as an introduction, I think it's very important to understand that we all want the same things, and we shouldn't doubt each other's intentions. Gary Francione, who was here before me, has a completely different approach than I have, but I think it's good if we don't guess at each other's intentions, but just accept that we each have the animals' interests at heart, and we want a vegan world. And that's the same for every activist. We want a vegan world, and let's not doubt their intentions. That said, we can and we should discuss strategy, because one strategy may be more efficient than another, and we have to really look for the best strategy. Strategies may be complementary. Some things may work for some people, other things may work for other people, but it's really important to keep in mind that a strategy may turn off more people than it attracts, right? So you can say like, oh, I did this, and these people got vegan because of what I did, but it may turn off without your knowing a lot of other people. Okay, so imagine you have $1 million to have a campaign on TV. What message would you put there? You know, what message would you put there that you know wouldn't like send too many people away, deter too many people from following you? It's a very important question to ask. And in this talk, I will be limiting myself to food, so to veganism as a diet. I know it's much more than that, but that's what I'm talking about right here. So what do we want? We want a vegan world. This is an image by a photographer called Carl Warner, and it's a foodscape. It's entirely made of food. You see that there's fruits in the air and broccoli forest, and this is like a bread wagon. It's all food. So he puts this in front of him, and then he takes pictures of it. So that's what we want, a vegan world, right? But if you look closer, we want actually a bit more. So there's 2 dimensions. There's the dimension of frequency. There's like Meatless Monday people up to the full-time vegan people, and so that's the dimension of frequency of eating animal products. And there's the dimension of motivation. What are people motivated by? So they can have no reason. They may not like meat, up till the ethical reasons. And if you look at what we like and what we don't like all these lightning bolts are things that we don't really like. We don't really want people to like stick with Meatless Monday or be veganish or whatever, and we don't want people to be vegan for the wrong reasons. We don't want them to be health vegans or whatever. We want them to be vegan for the animals, right? That's the only thing that we like. I think most of you can follow that. Now, I think what I want to do here is give you 3 ideas that are somewhat controversial. I think the fastest way to achieve world veganization is if we spend some time, not all of our time, but some time not talking about the animals and morality all the time. And we don't need to ask all the time to people to go vegan. The aim is to go vegan, but the ask, the demand, the question that we ask to people can be different. And I will explain why. And the third insight is what is efficient in our movement, what achieves the most change, is dependent on where our movement is in time. Today, what is efficient today is completely different than what will be efficient in 50 years' time. Okay? So, this is a quote by Jeremy Bentham. I think you all know it. The question is not can they reason nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And I made my own variation. The question is not am I right, nor is this my truth, but does this work? Does this work is the most important question we can ask. Not like, is this right? Is this like, does this dovetail, does this jive with the definition of veganism, but does it work, okay? So the challenge that we're up against is this. It doesn't look very good. We have this meat consumption today. We expect this demand for meat and other animal products by 2050. And that's because countries like China and India are increasing their meat consumption and animal products consumption because they're getting richer, okay? So that's a dire situation. You may be familiar with the 3 ends of justification by Melanie Joy. There's more ends. Animal products are normal, they are natural, they're necessary. You know about that, like we think that they are necessary for our health, they're nutritionally necessary. They're nice, tasty, and they're not the first thing we are worrying about. There's so many things that people in the world worry about, and meat eating or eating animal products is sometimes the last thing on their mind. So there's many answers we can give to the question, why do people eat meat? And one of the answers we could give is, most people eat meat because most people eat meat, okay? So people do things that other people do, and even if they realize that there's something wrong maybe with eating these animals and making them suffer, they might say like, okay, but there's like 98% of the people eating them, so it can't be that wrong, can it? Right? So they just continue, okay? So I think this is what it looks like to most people. We can say vegan is easy, and to some people it's easy, and maybe to you it was easy to go vegan, but it's not, definitely not to everybody. I think for most people it looks like this, like they ask you like, what do you eat? How can you survive? You know, that's the kind of questions they have. So it's not easy at all. It is very much swimming against the stream to go vegan, to be vegan today, okay? So I summarize this like this: compassion at this moment costs too much. It is too costly to be compassionate. That means that if you want to be compassionate, and if you want to like put it into practice to be compassionate, it means you have to change a lot of your behavior. And most people are not prepared to do that. Most people here in the room were prepared to do that, and that makes you by definition different than the 99% other people of the population. Okay, so we will need other strategies to convince these other people. So how do we get there to this vegan world? Let me look at the why. Okay, this is my why. This is what I want to avoid: the suffering and the killing of animals. So I'm ethically motivated, and I think most of you will be morally, ethically motivated too. Okay? But that's not the only thing, that's not the only message or the only motivation we can give people. Imagine you're on a trip in India, and you see all kind of like disgusting meat hanging out on the carts, and it's unrefrigerated. And you think you're not a vegan, you know, you're just a normal omnivore, and you think like, my God, this is really nasty, this is like unrefrigerated, and it's unhygienic, and I may get some disease from eating this, you know. And so what may happen is that you're in India and you see all this great vegetarian and vegan food over there, and you decide like, okay, while I'm here on my 3-week trip, I'm gonna be a vegetarian here, or a vegan, okay? And at that moment, you don't have any moral motivation, you understand? So what I'm saying is there's moral and non-moral motivations for change. Most of you had a moral motivation, but there may be non-moral motivations. There may be motivations in the sense that there was an environment that was very vegan friendly and you just joined it, okay? So moral factors, we have moral factors and non-moral factors. Moral factors are like, how are the animals treated? the fact that the animals have to die, the environmental factors, etc. And we have all kinds of moral tools in our movement. We have our websites and our videos and our conferences, etc. But we have also non-moral factors. And that's the availability of the alternative. We have all kinds of, imagine you're just like in India, living in a world where everything is vegan. You don't need, at that moment, you don't need a moral conviction to become a vegan, okay? That's very important. So, and we have all kinds of non-moral tools also. Restaurants, shops, products, cooking lessons to increase people's skills, etc. Okay? So still, our movement very much has a moral focus. It focuses on morality. It focuses on convincing people that eating animals, making animals suffer is wrong, okay? And why is that? We do that, we have this moral focus because we think it works. We think in all revolutions and evolutions, the morality was very important. For instance, this is an anti-slavery poster that says here, 3 million of your fellow beings are in chains. That's a moral argument, right? We care about our brothers and sisters in chains. We say, like, we shouldn't do that. These people are the same as ours. We shouldn't do that. We should stop slavery, etc. A moral argument, okay? So we think it works, but it wasn't the only thing that helped. What also happened at the time of the abolition of slavery was technology. The steam engine made it a lot cheaper in a lot of instances to have automized labor rather than slave labor. Can you imagine how disruptive that was for the slavery trade? Can you imagine that changed things too? And we don't take this into account, but slavery was actually ended by a war. It was not that the South became convinced, like, oh my God, what we're doing is immoral. They know that now, most of them, not all of them, but most of them know it now that it was immoral, but they were convinced by a war, okay, by a war of the North against the South. All right, so we have a moral focus because we think it worked, but it doesn't, it's not the entire story, and also because we want people to do the right thing for the right reasons, okay? We want people to care about animals. Most vegans do. Some people are health vegans, and I don't mind health vegans. I'll talk about that later. But most people, most vegans want people to do the right thing for the right reason. So health vegans, a lot of ethical vegans are a bit like uncomfortable with it. Like, we don't really trust this person to remain vegan. We don't really trust her to like have solid convictions that will make her a vegan for the rest of her life. And I don't know what Gary Yourofsky is saying here about health vegans, but it's probably not something good, okay? So we have some kind of distrust toward health vegans. So that being said, compassion costs too much, so we have to work also on other factors, okay? So if you look at a situation where there's few alternatives, the less alternatives there are, the bigger the necessary effort, okay? Imagine plane travel. Suppose I convince you that plane travel is wrong today. And I can easily make a case that it's wrong because it contributes a lot to greenhouse gas emissions and to global warming. So it is, in fact, wrong. But what are you going to do if you want to go to the US, for instance, from here? You're going to take a boat that takes 10 days? You can, right? But it's a lot harder. So you see that it requires a lot more motivation to do that because there's not many alternatives, okay? So if we have the opposite situation, if I have a lot of alternatives, the required effort and the required motivation decreases. So I think that's where we have to get a situation in society with a lot of alternatives available everywhere. So let's do like a quick thought experiment. Suppose that this was all you could eat today, water and bread, all you could eat that was vegan. How many of you would still be vegan? Come on. Not everybody. Well, maybe not everybody's vegan in the room. But I like to think that I would still be vegan also if this was the only thing I could eat. But of course, it's hard to imagine, would you have gone vegan if this was the only thing available? Maybe not, okay? So I would say like, there's just a monk maybe who would have gone vegan with this kind of alternative, okay? But imagine we had already like 30 years ago, we had the macrobiotic diet and people discovered, oh, we can combine some things and yeah, we can actually make a good meal. And so more people became vegan. And then we have tofurkey, for instance, a really good meat substitute, and even more people become vegan because the effort decreases again. And if we have like, maybe nasty to some of you, but artificial meat that is exactly the same as real meat, and even more people can become vegan, okay? Because in the end, there's not much effort to be done anymore, okay? So you have to look at this way. This is this pole vaulter. We can tell her, like, we can talk to her head, and say like, you have to go vegan, or this is like, in this case, it's like, you can jump, you can do this, you're the best, come on, and we motivate her, and we psych her up, etc. That's one thing we can do. Or we can, what is the other thing we can do? We can lower the bar. Lower the bar means making it easier for her to jump. It has nothing to do with her ethical motivations, okay? The effort required would just be lower because the bar is lower. Of course, in sports it wouldn't be really fair, but you know, in society we can lower the bar by making it easier, all right? So what if eating vegan meals all the time would be so easy that people would do it without even caring for the animals? What if it would be like that? It would be, in a way, it would be brilliant, but on the other hand, we wouldn't really like it. We wouldn't really like it because we want people, like I said, to do the right thing for the right reasons. We want them to care about animals. So here is the good news. Our movement focuses the whole time on, well, a lot of time, on this direction. We think we change people's attitude and that will lead to behavior change, right? I give you the information about animals being killed and hurt, etc., and then we hope that people will say like, okay, this is true, I'm going to stop eating animals. And sometimes it happens like that, often it happens like that, but there's a complementary action that we have to do, a complementary strategy, and that is not just this, but also this. Behavior change influences attitude change. And what do I mean with that? If people change their behavior for whatever reason, for instance, for health reasons, for instance, because they're in India and there's only vegetarian stuff to eat that looks healthy, then it will change their attitude. And it's very logical because as long as people are involved in something, as long as they have a stake in something, as long as they're stakeholders with S-T-E-A-K, you know, it's very difficult to change. Look at this. These people are doing the same thing. These two people. It's a matador or a bullfighter and a butcher, right? And they're both killing bulls. They're both killing cows. Who do you think we hate the most? We have the most problem with? Or if you're an omnivore, who do you think people have the most problem with? Who are the most frustrated with? Of course, the bullfighter, right? And why is it? There's all kinds of reasons, but I think the main reason is because they're not involved in this. They don't have a stake in this. Okay? It's like people say like, oh, I'm against fur, because they don't wear a fur coat, right? So what we have to do is decrease the dependency on meat eating. If they're already eating something different, it will be much easier to be against meat, all right? So if you're already vegetarian now and then, for instance, at your work, etc., it opens your heart and your mind. It opens your empathy. It makes compassion easier if you already have taken some steps, right? So the non-moral factors enable the moral factors. Let me give you a couple of examples of really interesting things that are happening in this field of like making it easier. This is Patrick Brown. He's like a chemist at Stanford University, and he started recently Impossible Foods. And Impossible Foods was just offered $300 million by Google. They wanted to buy it. And he's trying to invent the ideal veggie burger, all right? The Impossible Cheeseburger. This is Josh Tetrick from Hampton Creek, who is trying to come up with egg alternatives. Egg alternatives that are really completely disruptive. The egg industry in the United States is trying to stop them. Beyond eggs. These are the guys from moo free without the moo, okay? Milk without the moo, milk that does not come from a cow. Okay, they're trying to make milk that is exactly the same nutritionally, chemically as cow's milk, but it isn't. Can you imagine the disruption? It's not just soy milk or almond milk, but it's like the same milk, but not from a cow. Okay? Moo free. Vegan cheese, the same thing. This guy, Andras Forjak, is trying to make fake leather from cultured cells. And this guy is the guy who, Mark Post, who developed the first in vitro meat burger for $250,000 a couple of years ago. He thinks that we can have in vitro meat on the market in 5 to 7 years. So what do we see is that the products that a lot of people like so much, meat, eggs, dairy, shoes, leather shoes, etc., we could still have them in the future without the animals. Without the animals being involved. Can you imagine what a game changer that is, right? So there would be at that point no ethical commitment necessary. The ethical commitment can come after that. It will be so much easier to care when they're not involved, okay? Other examples, Native Foods Cafe is a cafe, a restaurant in the United States that wants to have a couple of hundred restaurants, a vegan restaurant, in a couple of years. Or Veggie Grill, same thing. So a lot of things are changing. So let me recap. Eating vegan or being a vegan is still very much swimming against the stream. You can become, even temporarily, a vegan or eat vegan for other reasons than moral reasons. When we increase the alternatives, the required effort decreases, and behavior change can precede attitude change. All right? So let's look at the what. What should we tell people to do? So Gary Francione, before me, undoubtedly told people that the only moral thing to do can be to ask people to go vegan. That's the moral baseline, and that's what we have to do. I don't agree with that. I think there's faster ways to get where we want. So, but the argument to have the go vegan message is that it's, well, if we say anything less, if we tell people like to do meatless Mondays, then it seems that we are kind of like allowing them to eat meat on the other days. I think this is not true, and the effect will be certainly different. Okay? The important things to keep in mind is that people are much more likely to take steps when you ask for not too much. Okay? If being vegan was easy, we would have a lot of more vegans already. Secondly, reducers may become vegans. Most people go in steps. Okay? It's very strange that some people here, or some people, they will say like everybody should do it right now, even though all of them did it in steps. You know, they took steps. Like I was like almost a vegetarian, but I ate fish, and then I became a complete vegetarian, and then I became a vegan, etc. Okay? And thirdly, and most importantly, many meat reducers may tip the system more quickly than the couple of percentages of vegans that we may hope to have in a couple of years. Why is that? This is a lesson from gluten-free. A woman on Facebook, she said this. She said like, oh, it becomes really difficult for me to explain that I'm really gluten intolerant. I have really a problem. If I eat gluten, I get sick. And there's all these other people, 10% of the population, who are not like really gluten intolerant. You know, and they try to avoid gluten, but it's not really a matter of life and death for them. You know the difference, right? But on the other hand, she says like, thanks to all these fakers, thanks to these fake gluten allergic people, my choice is much bigger now, of course, because they have so much bigger impact on the market, on demand, okay? So what happened is that the demand by a big group of fakers created a big choice. So it's the same in our movement. We have a small amount of vegans, a bigger amount of vegetarians, but a much bigger amount of meat reducers, okay? So if today it is easy for you to be vegan, or easier than it was 20 years ago, it is mainly thanks to the meat reducers. Why? Because the companies, they cater in the first instance to the meat reducers, to the flexitarians, right? That's the most important market for them. If there were only vegans, you would have maybe a couple of small companies catering to vegans, but the bigger ones, they're driving the market, they're catering to the flexitarians in the first place. So we have to thank the flexitarians, the meat reducers, so they're very important. In itself, of course, the meat reducers have the biggest impact on the amount of suffering. I mean, altogether, they prevent more harm than the small percentage of vegans and vegetarians, okay? So they make it also easier for everybody to go vegan, like I said. So don't roll your eyes at meat reducers. They're very important, okay? I'm saying that as somebody who's been vegan for 17 years. What are the motivations of these meat reducers? If you ask vegans for their motivations, it's mainly animal rights, okay? But if you check the motivations of meat reducers, it's different. It's health, taste, environment, and only on the fourth place it's animals. So we have to talk about these reasons if we agree that getting a lot of meat reducers is important, okay? So putting the why and the what together. I started by saying we want people to be vegan and to believe that to do it for the animals, okay? So you remember the graph. We want them to be vegan for the right reasons, all right? So the thing is, however, that if you look at the vegans, they're very minor. They're just a very small percentage of the population. And for instance, the Meatless Monday people, there's a lot more of them, so they have much bigger impact, okay? Right. So, and the main thing is, if you would be not agreeing with this message of like meat reduction, just remember that as choices increase, and it's the meat producers that are responsible for the increase of choice, becoming stricter, going vegan all the way like that becomes easier, okay? And as people eat vegan for whatever reason, for health reasons, for whatever reason, their defense goes down and their compassion can grow, and they can grow in terms of their motivation towards more ethical reasons, all right? Like that. So we will end up there. We will have people caring about animals. It's just a less direct way than saying like, you have to go vegan now because animals suffer. I'm not saying don't say that, but think of the alternative. Think of saying something like, reduce your meat consumption for this and this reason. And think that you may have much more of an impact and that we may tip the system faster that way, okay? So the message that I have, or the approach that I suggest is like this, is like pragmatic and non-moral. It's about reduction, it's about doing it for any reason, or telling people they can do it for any reason. It's about increasing skills, and it's about the focus on the environment around them, on creating alternatives. The other approach that, for instance, Francione talks about is complementary with that. It's about go vegan for the animals, it's about becoming active, and it's a focus on the personal ethics. These two things can go together, okay? But I think that, like I said, it's a matter of time. And I think right now we have to work more on the first approach, or more than we're already doing. Creating a fertile growing ground, a fertile breeding ground for vegans. If we do that, if we make it easier, it will be in the second case, in the second phase, much easier to grow a lot of vegans. All right? So that's I think phase 2, where these moral arguments get the most attention, the biggest focus. Right now, I think we should mainly focus on increasing the availability. All right? So we can talk about reducing animal products, eat more plant-based products, try meat alternatives, all these messages that are not the go vegan message. But we can also use the go vegan message, but think about like who you are talking to. Okay? That's my advice at least. There's no moral reason that you have to talk always about the go vegan message. You just can see who you have in front of you. With some people it may work, like with young people, with philosophically inclined people, rational people who like to think, and then you can talk about speciesism, etc. But if you talk to, like, for instance, older people or something, who are not like necessarily going to be very much interested into morality, etc., and they worry mainly about their health, talk about health, okay? So adapt your message. There's no reason to always have the same message. So that's what I call the art of activism, is to have the right approach at the right time, okay? The right time as a matter of like who you have in front of you, but also the right time in the history of our movement, okay? And I'll finish by saying something about the future. So we want people to care about animals and to stop eating them. But there's some things that may happen before that. I believe in a vegan world. I believe we will get there, but maybe not directly, not as straight ahead as we want, though maybe faster than we imagine. So what may happen before that? Meat may become too expensive. It may become too expensive because we have all these issues surrounding meat. Meat has a very high impact on the environment, animal products in general, of course, on the animals, on hunger, on health, etc. Like health, we're not going to be able to keep affording all the health costs in our societies. So we have to work on prevention, for instance. Meat may become too risky. We escaped avian influenza and Mexican flu, etc. a couple of times. We may hit the big one sometime. And maybe after that or during that, we may say like, oh my God, this is getting really too dangerous, this intensive factory farming and eating meat. So maybe this will give a very big push. Meat may become redundant. It may become redundant because of great chefs who are like showing us that we can make really great food, great menus without animal products, okay? Or it may become redundant because we have this cultured meat in a few years, okay? So all these things may happen before meat may become immoral. So I think we may have the order a bit wrong. I think meat will become immoral, but some things will happen before that. But we will one way or the other, we will get to the vegan world. Thank you very much.